Now we move to our second speaker for today. Our second speaker is Dr. Nariman Haji Hammu. Dr. Nariman is the founder and CEO of the Center of Learning Innovations and Customized Knowledge Solution, CREX. She's also the founder and editor of the International Journal of Excellence in E-Learning, and founder and first elected president of the Middle East E-Learning Association. Dr. Nariman served as a provost for learning and academic development at the Hamdan bin Mohammed Smart University in Dubai. She has accumulated over the past 20 years a lot of experience and professional background, and she's been a consultant for various higher education institutions across the region as far as technology integration and e-learning in higher education are concerned, as well as quality assurance and accreditation and governance. Dr. Nariman received the Arab Women Award for Education in 2016 and the Influential Education Leaders Award at the University of Cambridge in 2017. She delivered more than 120 keynote addresses and workshops, and led numerous roundtables and panel discussion. So without further ado, I do invite Dr. Nariman to speak to us on how to establish a lasting COVID-19 compatible teaching system. Thank you, Dr. Nariman. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I don't know if you are able to see my slides.
Yes, we do.
Yes, thank you very much to the organizer for inviting me, to Dr. Ghada very specifically. And I would like in my very short intervention to talk about reimagining higher education after COVID-19 and look at it from a strategic perspective that would look at the macro, micro, and meso level. So what I will be covering are the three stages of the pandemic, the long-term challenges and opportunities that COVID-19 has brought to us. And I would like to really talk about the concept of reimagining higher education post-COVID. I know we're still not in the post-COVID, but I think the planning for the post-COVID period has to start now. And finally, I'd like to talk about what are the sort of strategies and imperatives that we should be looking at in order to implement long-term sustainable adoption of online learning. Now, I think that we all know that we've gone through three stages during the pandemic. The first stage really started pretty much in most parts of the world between February and March, and we looked at it as the rescue stage, which is really the stage where we were trying to respond very quickly to something that we haven't planned. Universities and schools all over the globe have actually tried to move to emergency remote teaching. We were not prepared for it, and obviously the success in this stage was very dependent and varied depending on different nations and different institutions and how much maturity they had with infrastructure and with readiness of faculty and also students for this form of learning. We then went to another stage, which is really the recovery stage, and this is what happened for many of us after the spring semester. Once we had the time and the chance and the opportunity to reflect on what has happened during the spring semester and basically learn from our mistakes and start planning for the new academic year 2021. And for many of us, we had to put many scenarios in place depending on how the pandemic was evolving. So we went from full-fledged online scenarios to blended learning scenarios with low density attendance on campus because we did not know exactly what would happen. So many of us, for instance, in this part of the world, many institutions had to put multiple scenarios to present to the ministry for the start of the new academic year. And what I would really like to emphasize today is on the third stage, which is rethinking higher education, the renewal stage, which is looking beyond the pandemic and looking at what are the lessons we've learned from the pandemic, what are the opportunities that the pandemic has created, and also looking at basically, what are the challenges that we should be ready to address. So the first thing, it's very interesting that the higher education, inside higher education, have since the pandemic run regular surveys among leaders of higher education to ask them what they feel as the major pressing concern on the long run scenarios. So they're not looking at the short-term challenges or the midterm challenges. And what they're doing actually, they're comparing the results they're getting from the respondents as they are doing these surveys. So you can see in maroon are the results and the responses in March. Then the navy blue one is basically the April one. And then you can see the ciel is actually the June one, which is the results of the latest surveys. And what you can see in many institutions across the globe, there are some common pressing concerns for the higher education sector, among which are a decline for student enrollment and the overall financial stability of institutions, given the financial loss that some institutions have witnessed, especially those catering for international students and so forth. You can see demands for reimbursement, but one of the major finding is actually the perceived decrease in the value of higher education. And we can see that these percentages have moved from 48% in March to becoming more significant, raising to 72% in June, which means that globally there is a questioning on the value of higher education and what we are able to deliver. Now, there are also other challenges that have been associated with COVID and the pandemic, and these are more on long-term challenges. We're not talking about the challenges that we've experimented last academic year or that we are still experimenting, but on the long run, if the pandemic was to continue, we risk, and my previous colleague have mentioned that, we risk to look at increased inequity and inequality in access. We look at widening the digital gap among students. We still have to remember that in Latin America, for instance, there are more than 154 million students that were not able to access online education. There is still 50% of the households globally, according to UNESCO, that are not connected to the internet, and 30% of the world population that is not still connected online. So there is a danger of actually expanding the digital divide. There is also a challenge of reduced public and private funding for the higher education sector. And universities in the United States, for instance, are already witnessing this. There's also concern around the socio-emotional impact on students and academic staff for remote teaching. Many of us, online learning, we have to take into consideration is not for everyone. And there's still a large number of students and a large number of faculty that find that there is nothing comparing physical contact and physical communication. The other challenges that were identified by the World Bank in the same report was basically the permanent closure of institutions due to financial sustainability, which has become challenging, and some of the programs that eventually might shift completely online. It doesn't mean that every single program is going to move online, but there is a potential for many programs, especially those addressing adult students, to move online. We're also looking at loss of higher education contribution to the local and national civic communities and culture, and loss of research, including research collaboration, although we are witnessing new forms of collaboration that are emerging, which might present an opportunity on the long run. And obviously, there is a worry and a concern about increased graduate unemployment because of the financial situation that the globe is witnessing. But just like the pandemic has brought up a lot of challenges, it has brought along a lot of opportunities that we might be able to capitalize on it on the medium to long term. We might be witnessing an expansion of online and blended learning. We might be looking at new educational models that may expand further and emerge. There's a lot of discussion around micro-credentials and digital badges, and the pandemic is seen really as a catalyst for this. We also might be looking at diversification of financial sources for institutions of higher education, more partnerships with international organizations. Student recruitment, although at the immediate stage we are witnessing decline in student enrollment, especially among the international students, but student recruitment on the long run might actually change in nature, and many universities might be able to expand below their geographical boundaries. We also are looking at remote working mechanisms, part-time employment. Many countries are also looking at tenure contracts and other ways of engaging talent wherever it's located. And I think that one thing that the pandemic have brought in is that there will be a major significant shift in the pedagogy that we adopt in teaching, even if we were to continue teaching in a face-to-face traditional mode. We will relook at ways of assessment, and we'll talk more about this later on. And we will see more public-private partnership. I think that there hasn't been a time where there's been so much collaboration happening, not only within the sector, but also across the sector. We see IT companies coming and working hand in hand with telecommunication companies, with universities, with research center. And I think that this is one of the great opportunities maybe that actually the pandemic has offered us. We are also looking at new ways in engaging in research. And this is an example. We did not have to travel. We did not have to fly to different locations, but we were able to come here virtually and meet and share our views and experiences. And we might have new markets, and there might be a potential for really exploiting technology and reducing costs on the long run. So in a nutshell, for the higher education, technology is really a game changer, not just in the way we deliver teaching and learning and the way we assess students, but it has the potential to provide a wider role for online learning to really play in both the academic and professional education world. We might look at the transformation of our workplace, working remotely with professors and researchers all over the globe. We might look at more effective and efficient student services and automation of these services to support the entire learning experience. We might be looking at embracing digital online marketing and digital student recruitment methods that allows us to reach students in different parts of the globe. We've talked about collaboration, which technology is really enabling. We might also look at a growth in digital platforms to serve education. There are so many new applications and platforms that are being developed on a daily basis to support teaching and learning, to support student services in career counseling, in libraries, and so forth. And I think that this is really a great potential for the sector. We also are going to be looking at new ways of creating digital resources, open educational resources that we can actually share among ourselves. And most importantly, technology will really actually improve decision-making in universities. Data analytics has a real potential, not just to transform learning experience, but to make sure that we can support data-informed decision across the sector. We can predict the future, we can forecast the future, we can visualize how the future will be presented. So technology is really a game, a change gamer. But very importantly for universities, to be able to effectively use technology, it is important that there are strategies that are put in place at both the level of the institutions and at the level of the government and the regulatory bodies. As institutions, we need to partner and work together. We need to cultivate a culture of engaged faculty, staff, and students. We need to embrace a stakeholder approach. We need to be more innovative in our pedagogies. It's not about really using the technology, it's about the pedagogical framework in which we integrate technology to achieve our learning system. We need to overall build up an online learning ecosystem and be able to think outside of the box. And I think previously we heard from Alexandria University about the adoption or the looking at the quality assurance. So So, and basically we need to adapt our internal quality assurance practices and systems to fit the nature of online learning. And obviously, you know, we need to make sure that we have a mean of regularly evaluating our practices. But it doesn't end up with the institutions, because the government plays a very important role in supporting and enabling online learning. We need to have stimulus plans for economic and social recovery beyond COVID-19, for modernizing the infrastructure at national level. We need to have strategies to reduce the digital divide. And there are many organizations like the World Economic Forum and the World Bank that are working with countries on trying to bridge that gap. We need to be able to enable distance and online education by recognizing non-traditional forms of education. This is still a major concern for most Arab states. We need to engage the national players of the ecosystem to be able to reach to a consensus on a strategy to foster innovation and technology in online learning. And we need to adapt our external quality assurance regulations to be more flexible. So in a nutshell, if we were to reimagine the university beyond post-COVID, there will need to be considerable effort happening at 3 levels. At the macro level, which is the national, regional, a global dimension, at the meso level, which is really the institutional level dimension, and at the micro level, which is a lot of what happens with the instructors, with the faculty at the level of their programs and their courses. And unless these 3 levels work together, it will be almost impossible to reimagine higher education post-COVID, to be more responsive and agile, to respond to basically, you know, ongoing needs and change. So there is a role that government plays. There is a role that higher institutions play in terms of articulating a blueprint, putting a strategy to embrace online learning. And there is the execution of that strategy and plan, which happens at the level of the colleges and departments. And to be able to do that, we need a set of enablers, which are the policies, the legal framework, the financial support, the modern technology infrastructure, the broadband width, the public-private sector collaboration, the basically, you know, reimagining the provision of higher education through value creation as opposed as volume-based delivery. So if we wanted to zoom very quickly on each one of these elements, at the macro level, institutions, or there are 5 national priorities that have to be there. The first thing is articulating agile policies that provides that means that we're creating policy orientation that enables flexibility to institutions, that promotes autonomy for institutions to be able to embrace new modes of delivery. We need to look at recognition of online learning, micro-credential, recognition of prior learning. Our national policies should really give us flexibility and should give institutions autonomy to do that. We also need to look at external quality assurance and the standards and mechanisms through which we will safeguard the quality of online and blended delivery. We're not jeopardizing quality by moving online or blended, but enforcing it by looking at parameters which are different. We also need to look at co-creation. How do the in higher education, different stakeholders come together to articulate a strategy that is relevant to the future. And we obviously need to look at having strong and reliable digital infrastructure that will support the delivery of online learning. And finally, governments need to encourage higher education sectors, government sector to really leverage on the opportunities and the capabilities that online learning will be offering. So that's really at the macro level. At the meso level, which is the institutional level, it is important that, yes, what we did in COVID was, you know, out of nowhere. We didn't have time to plan. We called it emergency remote teaching. And now we want to move on into more meaningful online learning experiences by actually creating a new vision and strategy for embracing online blended learning and different forms of digital enabled education, which is student-centric, which ensures strategic alignment between our initiatives, our resources, and what we're aiming to achieve, which is basically enabled by transformative smart technologies. It's not really about just buying the technology, but about making the optimum use of the technology. We need to have a culture of dynamic change where resistance is not really impeding us from achieving our strategic objectives. We need to be very rapid. And I think the pandemic has shown that the sector was agile and was rapid. Despite all the challenges, most universities have rapidly responded to the pandemic and moved online with their existing capabilities. And Our strategy needs to leverage on partnership. We shouldn't be inventing everything. Ultimately, what we want to do is to actually produce knowledgeable graduates that are ready for the 21st century, that are digitally enabled. So what we're trying to do
Nariman, you have
yes.
3 more minutes.
Yes. So what we're trying to do here is really making sure that we build the right capabilities by looking at basically, you know, innovation, faculty enablement, the overall student experience, the infrastructure, so that eventually we deliver the right outcome at the right time, in the right manner, so that we can be responsive as universities. Finally, we go to the micro level, which is really what we do within our classroom. And we really need to look at having a data-driven approach to identify student needs and industry needs. We need to design student-centric programs that are agile and that can be adapted very quickly and adjusted very quickly to meet the rapid changes that are happening in the industry. We need to have a proactive way of engaging our students. It's very difficult to try to replicate the traditional mode of teaching online. We need to be more innovative because online has its particularity, assessment has its particularity, and trying to mirror our high-stake examination in an online environment would not always work. Research tells us how best to assess students in an online environment. We need to look at talent, building capacity for faculty to adjust to new pedagogy, but also prepare students for their learning experiences, because students are not always ready for the online experience. We need to look at holistically our student experience, our extracurricular activities, what happens beyond the classroom, and we need to really adopt different approaches to deliver our products and services. Quality will have to remain the plasma for the entire ecosystem, and we need to basically be able to experiment and innovate with new ideas. So these are the 3 levels as institutions which we will need to consider, and that will prepare us or help us to really develop an agile and lifelong learning, sustainable online learning environment. And I would like to leave you with the quote of Peter Drucker that says, "The greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence itself, it is to act with yesterday's logic." And that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nariman, for this very nice and let me say fully loaded presentation, full of information, full of ideas. Thank you so much. And above all, thank you for keeping the time. At this time, okay, thank you. And we'll keep the possible questions after the 2 remaining speakers will finish.